Well, good morning. Wonderful to see you all here this morning. We're going to try having me up here because we're getting more and more people who are watching this on the internet. And you're standing down there, it kind of cuts you off right about here, especially if you're vertically challenged as I am. And so as much as I'd prefer to be down there among you and all that, we're going to try this and see how and if it works. What that means is I'll need help from the people who usually give me help when I've got people raising their hands on the periphery. Just point at them and that'll steer. My peripheral vision is gone, evidently. So as is our practice, let's begin our time this morning with prayer. Father, we thank you that you have chosen to redeem us through the gift of your Son. We will be talking about this and reading about this this morning. Would you bless us with particularly open and tender hearts as we look at the gift that allows us to be in your presence, allows us to call ourselves your people, and allows us to worship you and serve you. Give us open minds and hearts that we'll be prepared to receive your word. It's through your Son that we pray. Amen. So we are starting with the 18th chapter of John. We have 2 more Sundays, today and next Sunday, on this. We have not come anywhere close to plumbing the depths, but as is our practice, today we'll talk about one particular thing that kind of jumps out, and it is the sense, it's the contrast, the stark contrast between the appearance of power and the actual practice of power. And as Jesus is arrested and run through a kangaroo court, we will see lots of signs of power, political power, economic power, religious power, and we'll look at those things and we'll say, yeah, I recognize that. That looks like power to me. And then we will compare that with the real power, the power that is evidenced in the control of events that are otherwise out of the control of people who think that they're in control. So this is the 7th sign. The death, burial, and resurrection are the 7th of the 7 primary signs. And as we've gone through this 13-week study, we've talked about these signs, and they seem to me to be escalating. Each sign is a little larger and a little more impactful and gets us a little closer to the ultimate truth here, which is Jesus is about to conquer death. The biggest, scariest hurdle that any human has to come in contact with, and Jesus is about to conquer it, not without his own trepidations. He's not insensitive to the pain that's going to happen, to the public embarrassment that's going to happen. He's well aware of that. And yet at the same time, he goes into this process with absolute confidence that everything is under control. The outcome is predetermined and has been predetermined from the very beginning of time. And so this calm assurance that he has is in fact the calm assurance that we are supposed to have as we approach our lives together in God. So the big question is, who has the power? Who appears to have the power? Who's actually got the power? Judas seems to have a great deal of power. He has acquired from the Jews, John always calls them, the power people in the Jewish religion. He has acquired a cohort of Roman soldiers. Now that's pretty special. Rome did not give away its power readily, okay? Rome did not give away its power for no reason. So if you went to the local authorities and you said, I need a cohort of Roman soldiers, and toss in a couple of officers just to make sure that they do what I want them to do, you're talking about somewhere between 200 and 600 soldiers. It's a lot of bodies and a lot of payroll. And Rome doesn't give that away unless you've got a good reason. So what the reason is the Jews, the power people, are maintaining a level of social control over their people. And the deal with them is they go to the Romans and they say, when we need you, we want you to step in. When we don't need you, we want you to be invisible. And basically what they're saying is, we'll keep the people calm and under control if you'll just stay out of the picture and not be too visible, so that we can all pretend, all of us Jews can pretend that we're in control of our own destiny. And a part of this story that is so beautiful is these very people who are trying to maintain this image of social control and of political control. Yeah, Rome is there, but they're not really there. We're running things, and we're running things so that we are still God's people. We are the nation of Israel, and you should not worry about those Roman guys. We got them under control. Those are the very people who at the end of this story are going to say, we have no king but Caesar. They're going to make the ultimate political acquiescence in order to maintain what they think is control over the situation. So Judas has gone to the power people, the Jews, and he has said, what will you pay me if I turn this firebrand rabbi who's giving you so much trouble because you can't seem to open your mouth without giving him exactly the information he needs to make you look foolish? What would you pay me? They say 30 pieces of silver, and he says, fine, I'm going to need a Roman cohort. They say, no problem. I'm going to need some of the guards and power people from your group, no problem. And I'm going to need them all on the night that I say. And they say, you say the word, and we'll have all those together. So Judas has a cohort somewhere in the 200 to 600 person range of Roman soldiers. In addition to, he's got some muscle from the Jews themselves, some people who will represent the Jewish power structure in this whole interaction. And John is careful to point out that when this crowd arrives, they have lanterns, and they have torches, and they have weapons. Now, let's think about the story that we've got so far. How often have you seen Jesus look threatening to the local power structure? How often have you seen Jesus do something that makes the Romans want to grab their swords and spears and shields and go to battle? Has he ever looked like that? Ben, go ahead. Yes. Yeah, the cleansing of the temple is about it. And are the Romans threatened by that at all? Yeah, it just makes the Jewish power people look a little foolish, right? You can't even control your own temple precinct where your guards are in charge. How's that working for you so far, Jews? So other than that, Jesus has shown no sign of being a fomenter of social unrest, has he? He's really looked about as inconsequential from the Roman perspective as you can look, and yet the Jews are scared sockless by this man. And so what do you want to do if you're going to come against him? You get a whole bunch of Roman soldiers, and you make sure they're fully armed, and you make sure that you got all your ducks in a row, and you've got all the people there that you need in order to make this happen. And so what this is going to end up looking like is it's going to end up with the power people looking a little silly, which they tend to look that way anyway. But as we proceed, you'll see them look less and less like they have power. And ultimately, they are going to be completely and abjectly embarrassed by this situation. So 200 to 600 Roman soldiers plus officers, plus they've got the temple officers, muscle that keeps the people in line when they're hanging around the temple. They've got some servants from the high priests and the Pharisees, and lanterns, torches, and weapons. So, boy, they've got the whole panoply of earthly power going here, and it must have been a pretty impressive sight, right? Jesus takes his crew from the upper room where they have their pre-Passover supper, and he takes them across to a garden just across the Kidron Valley, and he's got, maybe at the max a couple dozen people with him, probably fewer than that. And here comes 200 Roman soldiers in full panoply. And they've got their spears and they've got their swords, and that's an impressive group of people, right? Pretty impressive. And if you were Jesus, you didn't happen to be the Son of God, you were just an ordinary Jew, and you're faced with this group, what's going to be your response? Let's run. Yeah, exactly. This would be the time to make yourself scarce. He has done this at various times because his hour had not yet come. This is his hour, and he just spent chapter 13 through 17 talking about the hour has come and what that means and how that's going to work itself out and how his people are going to remain safe through that. And we're going to see that here in a moment. Tom, you had a comment? Tom is making an excellent point. Not only do you have a seemingly insurmountable military force coming at you, but it's nighttime, right? You can't really see what's going on. And these guys are carrying torches and lanterns, lots of light sources kind of bouncing around. How many people are there out there? Man, that's a big group of people. Now, if you are Jesus, you don't have any problem with that because you know what's going to happen. If you are Jesus' disciples, how do you feel about that? You're probably a little nervous, right? Because remember, you're still carrying around this image that all of the other Jews are carrying around with them too. When the Messiah comes, what's going to happen? He's going to defeat Rome. Well, here comes Rome, folks. Are you ready? Are you ready for this confrontation? You don't look ready. There aren't enough of you, and you're not well enough equipped. And this could be a problem. Jesus doesn't have any visible power to speak of. He's got maybe a dozen, maybe fewer than that. We don't know how many he took with him. The gospel record indicates as few as 4 or 5 with him. He's got at least one sword. Peter's got his sword, and he'll pull that thing out and make really good use of it here in short order. They're significantly outnumbered. They're significantly overmatched. They don't have any training. They don't have any military experience. These guys are well trained. They've seen more than one battle, and when they come on the scene and they see this little gaggle of inexperienced, mostly fishermen, they've got to be saying, "Oh man, this is not. We're not even going to have to break a sweat to make this work." And sure enough, as it turns out, they won't have to. Ben, go ahead. Absolutely. Ben's point is that they have already seen, the disciples have already seen Jesus do some pretty amazing things, right? The other signs, all the signs that they've been seeing throughout, the most recent one being Lazarus comes walking out from his tomb after 4 days. He's still wrapped up in his tomb garments, and he comes walking out because Jesus said, "Lazarus, come forth." That's pretty powerful, isn't it? So here's what we expect, right? From the disciples, they're all saying, "Well, yeah, you got 200 Roman soldiers over there, but we got Jesus over here. Jesus, what are you going to do?" Is that how the disciples respond in this? Not so much. No, they're still married to this idea that Jesus is going to be the Messiah that they expect him to be. He's going to be a political Messiah. He's going to reestablish the physical reign of David on the throne. He's going to take out not just the Romans, There's all kinds of political forces at work here. He's going to take out the Romans. He's going to keep the Egyptians under sway. He's going to take care of the Persians who are still active off to the east. He's going to take care of all of those, and he's going to reestablish David's kingdom, and it's going to last forever. And so what do we know about tonight's confrontation with Roman soldiers coming in? Well, we don't know what's going to happen, but we do know what's ultimately going to happen. Jesus is not going to die. Jesus is going to conquer. And as it turns out, they're right, even as they are wrong. Yes, sir. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm. All right. Yeah. 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 Larry's point is we are not immune from this same problem of knowing what has to happen, knowing what can't possibly happen, because we know that God is in control. Therefore, because God is in control, he's going to implement my personal plan for my personal life. Well, maybe not, right? But ultimately, will God implement God's plan? Yes, he's going to implement his plan. The question is, how tuned in are we going to be to his plan? How tuned in are his disciples to his plan right now? Not all that tuned in. So, question is, who has the power? Well, first order business, faced with a Roman cohort with lanterns and torches and swords and all that good stuff, Jesus walks right up to him. And he says, who are you looking for? Does that strike you as being a kind of the way you approach an overwhelming force of foreign soldiers who would just as soon kill you as look at you? Hey, who are you looking for? And they say, Jesus the Nazarene. And then Jesus says those words that he says so often in John's gospel. He does not say, I am he. You have to include the he in order for it to make sense in English. He says, I am. And when he says, I am, they all fall down. And I'm just imagining this group of 200 heavily armed, shielded, all that good stuff, soldiers. And he says the name that God has used throughout the millennia to describe who he is. I am who I am. Tell them, Moses, I am sent you. And he says, I am. And they all kind of lose their balance and fall backwards. I'm not going to go any further because I probably will fall backwards. And this whole group immediately evidences who has the perceived power. Well, it's all those guys with the soldiers, with the swords and things, versus who has the real power. With the name of God on his lips, suddenly everybody just starts falling down. And there's a certain element of that that's kind of comical. And if the disciples were watching this through the eyes that we can watch it with our 2,000 years of historical perspective, if they were watching this with that perspective, they'd probably get a little bit of a smirk on their face. Wow, you guys look really powerful there as you're falling all over each other and trying to regain your composure and getting the mud off of your nice shiny suits there. It's really remarkable to watch how this plays out. John is nothing if not a great dramatist. He has a great drama going here. Overwhelming force on this side. One guy on this side who says, who are you looking for? Jesus of Nazareth. I am. Bloop. They all fall over. And then, in case you missed it, he does it again. So, who are you looking for? And they're picking themselves up and dusting themselves out. Oh, Jesus of Nazareth, I am. They all fall over again. If we can watch this with objective eyes, it's really a statement about who actually has the power. And who actually has the power is the unarmed guy over here that everybody's following, because nobody ever spoke like this man speaks. And so we watch this process happen, and we finally ultimately repeat it We're going to do this twice just to make sure you got the picture. If you're one of the 200 guys with your swords, you're starting to feel a little bit uncertain about how this is going to go. Maybe this guy's got some power that I can't see and that I'm not aware of. So once again, Peter knows best, right? We can always count on Peter to come charging in and save the day. Now, take a look at the situation from Peter's perspective. Jesus has just said, I am, and the soldiers have all fallen down. And now Peter is going to approach them with what? A sword. One sword. What is Peter thinking? Does he have any chance here of making this actually work? Does he really think that the few people that have followed Jesus over to the garden are actually going to overcome with the sword 200 to 600 well-trained Roman soldiers? Is he really ready to pick that fight? And yet, he pulls out his sword. And he doesn't even kill anybody. He slices off the guy's ear. He completely misses his objective here, which is a good thing, because Jesus is going to say, what? Put away your sword, right? And then, by the way, Luke is going to tell us, John thinks we already know this, Luke is going to tell us that Jesus is going to heal the ear of the servant of the high priest. And so he's going to put everything back to the way it was. But I want you to think for a moment about the thought process that at least Peter, and possibly some others among his disciples, the thought process that they're still carrying around with them. Jesus is going to overcome in this situation by the sword. Okay, have they seen any sign that Jesus is going to actually go along with their plan? No, they really haven't, okay? But now the time has come, the soldiers are here, something's got to happen, and that means we all need to pull our swords because we already know that Jesus is going to overcome by the sword. End of discussion. It can't be any other way. Is there any wonder why they look so dejected when the crucifixion is done and he finally breathes his last, and the two guys on the road to Emmaus say, we had thought that he was the real deal. And implicit in what they're saying is, but obviously not, because he didn't draw his sword, he didn't defeat the Romans, and he ended up dying. This is not our plan. This is not how this is supposed to go. Ben and then Larry, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. 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 Uh-huh. There's a yes, the way we get rolled up in our own worldview and our own understanding of how things work, it's easy to see how the Jews, in general, the Jewish population, could look at Jesus and say, there's our Messiah. There's the guy who's going to come riding in on a white horse. Okay, he's on the foal of a donkey. That's all right, because I remember from Sunday school that there was a donkey involved, and the king is going to arrive on that. So that's okay. As long as he's my king, and as long as he's going to take care of those lousy, terrible Romans, I'm okay with this plan. Once it becomes clear that this is not his plan, now I'm not so sure that I'm okay with it. Larry, you had something? There's good. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, and Larry's point is that Peter probably deserves at least some credit for standing up for what he believed in and who he believed in, and for saying to a certain extent, I mean, to pull your sword in the face of innumerable bad odds, it has to be a certain statement of faith, does it not? He's being brave, right? He's being brave for his Lord and Master, whom he's already confessed as being the Messiah, the Son of God. So we can give him a certain amount of credit for that. At the same time, who is it that's going to be denying him here shortly? Oh, well, you know, we do our best and then we muddle on through. Over here, go ahead, Art. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, Peter may very well have been looking at the statement, I am, and everybody falls down, as being the perfect opportunity to draw his sword, right? Let's get them while they're down and slice a few heads off, and then we'll go ahead and make Jesus king. For some reason, he didn't want to be made king when everybody was ready to make him king, when his triumphal entry was happening. But maybe now's the time, right? I mean, everybody's on the ground. Let's strike while the iron's hot, right? So, yeah, we can kind of see how he's thinking, and we can start to see how Jesus is thinking about this. Because Jesus already knows exactly what's going to happen. In fact, he's already told his disciples exactly what's going to happen, right? There hasn't been any mystery about that. In fact, wasn't it Peter who, when Jesus first started telling the disciples, here's what's going to happen when we get to Jerusalem, Peter said, no, Lord, no, that can't be. And Jesus' response is to call him the accuser, Satan, right? Get behind me, Satan. So it's easy for us to put ourselves in the disciples' position right here. And that's probably a good thing, because that's probably where we actually are. And the lessons that the disciples learned through all of this are the lessons that we probably need to learn as well. So now what have I done? Come on. Okay, we've lost our stuff again here. We're gonna work without the slides, because that's so. Peter evidently liked the odds. Jesus responds with, "Put away your sword." In spite of Peter's best efforts to get them all arrested, right? Now, if you're in the Roman guards and you've got, I'm sorry, I thought you were pointing to someone else. Go ahead, Judy. Okay. Yeah. 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 Exactly. Yeah, and that's to be praised in a qualified fashion. Peter's not without bravery, and he's not without an awareness of God's plan, and he's fully willing to dive in and do this. At the same time, if you're one of the Roman soldiers and this guy pulls out his sword and lops off some guy's ear, right? And I like Morgan's observation on that. Peter was going for the neck and the guy ducked, and that's why the ear. But if you're one of the Roman soldiers, what's your first response to this? Well, these guys just drew first blood. We're going to arrest the whole lot of them. We're going to take them all in, and Peter's going to be right at the front of the trial. And is that what Jesus wants? No. In fact, Jesus' next words are going to be, if you're looking for me, and I'm here to tell you that I am the one that you want, then let the rest of these go. And John says Jesus did that so that his prayer in chapters 13 through 17, that all of the people that God had given him would survive through all of this and would come out the other end ready to do what God had planned for them. He did this so that he could make sure that all of his people come through it alive. None of them are going to be arrested. Some of them are going to be arrested after Acts starts, right? Peter's going to spend some time in jail, and he's going to be surprised when an angel comes and unlocks it and walks him out to Rhoda's house, and Rhoda's going to be surprised to see him there. But God is in control in all of this. Jesus knows that unshakably, unswervingly, unalterably. This is what's happening. God's plan is playing out exactly as God had it planned from the very beginning. Give me a couple of faith statements about that. What does that tell you about your life today? If God's plan worked out perfectly in spite of all of those Roman soldiers, and in spite of Peter potentially inciting those Roman soldiers to move in and quell this revolution before it got any further than just one guy's ear being cut off, if God is in control of that situation such that he can undo what Peter's just done and put things right back on track, head in the direction he wants them to go, what might we expect today? Okay? Ben thinks we should expect the same thing today, that God's plan will work. Are you looking at the world around you? Does it look like God's plan is working out there? Okay. Did it come back? Oh, that's lovely. I don't know what's going on up there. We'll just ignore whatever that is. If it starts into a movie, I'm leaving. But if God's plan works out through all of this really looking out of control, okay, why would we expect anything different in our lives today? Does it not seem like God's plan is going to continue to work out? In fact, isn't that why we're here, to kind of be witnesses to the fact that, yeah, the world doesn't look like it's doing well at all, but yet here we are. Here we are meeting together, praising God's name in a few minutes and reliving the experience that we just went through in the Gospel of John together to reinforce this idea that he is here, he is alive, we are indwelled, we are empowered. And so we are, of course, going to go out against incredible odds, and things are going to work anyway. Okay? All right, so moving right along, I'm going to ignore all of that, and we'll just go to kind of a quick summary. Jesus shows up in front of the high priest, actually shows up in front of the high priest's father-in-law, who has been the high priest just a few years ago and may want to be high priest again. He has a small interaction with them. They're looking for reasons to take him to Pilate. He doesn't give them any in particular, but they take him to Pilate anyway. Now, this is an interesting interaction. You've got on this side Pilate and all of those Roman legions, right, that he's got parked right there in what we would think of today as modern Israel, particularly up at the northern end. They had all kinds of soldiers posted up there. He's down toward the south in Jerusalem now, where the Romans would have been more careful about not showing themselves unless somebody was getting out of line. If you got out of line, the Roman soldiers would come out of the woodwork and put you back into line. So you've got Rome on this side, you've got the Jews on this side, the power people who are trying to maintain their hold on power. And in their minds, they're maintaining hold on power so that God's will be fomented in their lives, right? They really think that this is what God has in mind. Are they right? Obviously not. Did they miss the Messiah they said they were looking for? Absolutely they did. But they're over here thinking that they're doing the right thing, and so they're manipulating Rome. Pilate, you're the new governor here. He's been here for maybe 2 or 3 years when this all happens. Pilate wants nothing more than to get a better assignment. The Judea assignment has always been a career wrecker. ever since Herod the Great died and the whole thing got divvied up, and Jerusalem, because it was a hot spot, trouble spot, got a special attention from the Romans. And so Pilate has his own power structure and his own palace and his own organization up north, and then he has to also maintain this office down in Jerusalem because these guys are they're so problematic. They're just always creating some kind of a problem for the Romans. And Pilate just wants to get out of it without getting anything on him. Okay? So the power people go to Pilate and say, "We want you to execute this guy." And Pilate says, "What has he done wrong?" And the response of the Jews is fascinating because Jesus hasn't given them the kind of material that they need in order to make a valid complaint against Roman law. So what they say is, if he hadn't done anything wrong, we wouldn't bring him to you. Don't ask too many questions. He's done something wrong. Trust us on this and take him away and have him crucified. Pilate's response, "Oh, you crucify him yourself." Of course, Pilate's kind of rubbing their nose in it when he does that because they can't crucify him. Only Rome can generate a valid death penalty. And by the way, if the Jews wanted to and felt like they could have carried out capital punishment with Jesus, and there were times when they were going to. Remember what they did when he said, "Before Abraham was, I am"? What'd they all do? They grabbed stones, right? In fact, a couple of commentators think they were probably standing in the temple precinct, and they're running over because there are stones all carved up and ready to go there to continue work on the temple. And so they just ran and grabbed some of those. And, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. That had to happen. We'll mop it up later. Apologies. Now watch me walk through it, and I'll slip and fall on my. It'll be great. It'll make great TV. All the folks on the internet will be looking at Bill doing foolish things. When he is in danger of capital punishment from the Jews, it's never by crucifixion. It's always by stoning. That's how capital punishment happened under the Jewish system. So even if they could do it, which under Roman law they couldn't, they wouldn't do it that way, and yet here they are saying, "We want him crucified." There's an interesting question there, and the commentators are all over the park on why it was important to them to have the Romans do this. But there's the actuality. They really want Rome to do it, and I think it's probably because they don't want to take responsibility for any fallout from that. The law of unintended consequences will come into play here somehow. They don't know how it's going to work out, but they want to be able to control the narrative by saying, "Well, we didn't kill him. We just took him to Rome, and Rome is the one who killed him," right? And there's all kinds of prophecies. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the desert, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, and all of those lifting up prophecies come into play here to dictate that the crucifixion is how this has to happen. Okay, so he ends up before Pilate. Pilate finally gives up, says, "Okay, I'll listen to him." Calls him in, says, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus says, basically, after a little, moving around and some discussion, he says, "Yes, it is as you say." But he's quick to add, "My kingdom is not of this world." In other words, you don't need to worry about it, Pilate. And that famous line that Pilate says comes out of that statement. Jesus says, "The ones who know the truth know to listen to me and to follow me." And Pilate says, the perfect postmodern response for the year of our Lord 2019, "What is truth?" Have any of you heard people actually question the reality of absolute truth? I have. Oh yeah, you hang around a college campus, you'll hear that all over the place. Well, that's your truth. That's okay for you. But don't inflict your truth on me. I have my own truth, and my own truth is whatever I say is true. And I like it that way. I prefer to have the ability to say what is true and what is not true. And Pilate's kind of saying, "Okay, so you've got your truth, and that's all right. But at the end of the day, he's with the Roman agnostic philosophers who say, well, there probably is some absolute truth somewhere, but we don't know how to find it or how to determine what's true and what's not. So let's just kind of roll with the punches and make this work. So Pilate comes out. I don't find anything wrong with him. The Jews send him back. You got to go back and you got to find something wrong with him. And that's when the Jews finally get the right idea. He called himself a king. Pilate goes right back in and says, are you the king of the Jews? And that's when they have that whole discussion. Pilate's still not convinced, though. He says, this guy is he's not armed. He doesn't have an armed uprising. He quelled what was starting to be an armed uprising. Back when my guys brought him in the first place, he even put the ear back on. I don't know how he does that, but clearly he's not a problem. And how this is all going to work out, ultimately, is the Jews say to Pilate, anyone who allows someone to say, I am the king of anything, anyone who allows that to happen is no friend of Caesar's. All right? Now Pilate's scared, right? Because what happens if the Jews send a detachment up to Rome and they talk to the Caesar and they say, you know your guy Pilate down here is letting a guy declare himself king of the Jews? The Judea, that place that's been such a problem for you all these years, there's another guy down here and Pilate is letting him get away with it. Can you imagine what the emperor in Rome is going to say? Well, Pilate is going to have to look for another job. In fact, Pilate may have to try and reattach his head when this is all done. Pilate knows that that's the case. Pilate knows that ultimately all these guys have to do is send a credible complaint to Rome, and he's gone. So he rushes right back in. He says, well, basically I don't believe in this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Has him scourged, has him brought out, prepared for a crucifixion, turns him over to the Jews, an act that is on its face illegal under Roman law. You don't turn a guy over to anyone who's not Roman to carry out this Roman crucifixion, and yet that's what's going to happen. And he's going to go through the whole crucifixion process, and he's going to be in control of it the entire time. Isn't that amazing to think of the moment when he appears to be least in control, the moment when forces external to him appear to have complete control over the situation, the moment that the Jews have been waiting for, when they finally get him in the hands of the Romans and they finally get the Romans to do what they wanted them to do by hook or by crook, and ultimately by proclaiming their allegiance to Caesar. Is this man the king of the Jews? And the Jews' response is, we have no king but Caesar. You can't get any more abjectly defeated if you're a Jew than to proclaim Caesar as your king. They still didn't say Lord. That's what they wanted. That's what Romans always wanted to hear. Caesar is Lord. But Caesar is king, and we have no other king but Caesar. That's good enough for this moment. Jesus is going to go to the cross, and he's going to be crucified, and he's going to have a spear in his side, and it's going to be absolutely clear that he is dead, and no one's going to question whether or not he is dead. And he is defeated, he is gone, he is no longer a player on the earth. He is no longer a messianic pretender. He is no longer anyone that anyone will follow. Even the people who have been closest to him will not be following him at the end of this story. He has been abjectly defeated from a certain perspective. And at the same time, from a godly perspective, from a heaven perspective, from a kingdom of God perspective, he just won the war. Isn't that a weird situation to be in? Isn't that a weird place to find ourselves? By dying, he defeats death. By losing control over his organization, he creates an organization like the world has never seen. By putting away Peter's sword and healing the small wound that he inflicted, He creates an environment in which all humans can be healed by redirecting his people away from the objective that they've always had, the earthly reign of the new David on David's throne. He turns them toward the ultimate power that supersedes all human power in the heavenly kingdom. The kingdom, by the way, of which we are all citizens, and in which we have the role of priests and royalty. What an amazing picture. Let's close that picture with prayer and we'll be done for today. Father, we thank you so much that in defeat you show us victory. In weakness you show us absolute strength. In the seeming ending, negative ending of a plan for world domination, you in fact demonstrate the power of controlling the entire world. We look forward to that time, Father, when every knee bows and every tongue confesses that Jesus is Lord, and we proclaim that truth to the world today. It's through your Son that we pray. Amen.